Good morning. So the first thing we want to do with the spreadsheet is to create IDs. Now each row, if you remember, represents the results for a verbal and a maths test of 527 applicants to a certain college. Now you can see here that we have a column for the results on the verbal test, a column for the results on the maths test, but we don't have any IDs. So we are going to insert a column. We are going to put a header, students' IDs, and we are going to copy the formats across. Now to copy the formats, we select the column, then we go to the format painter and we copy it across. The other thing we said is we could create IDs that are numerical, something like this. Okay, and then I'm going to drag it down. So there will be student number 1, student number 2, student number 3, but it's best to use a convention that involves some text, because this will be a bit difficult to refer to students in this way. So what we did, we used a formula in which we use a text. This is your convention here at the university. You have the class, so BIT, and then you have the year of enrollment. Now let's put it 2021 for simplicity, and then you have a number for the ID of the student. So I'm going to append, so this is the append symbol, with a number. Now what I want is to have, of course, a unique number. So to do that, if I write it manually like this, then I will have to do manual modification across the row, right? So I'll have to take this and put it down like this and then modify the number at the end. Now this is too much work. So what we could do, instead of putting the number manually like this, we can use a formula. Now Excel has a formula called row, and what this does, it gives the row of the cell that's given as a parameter or the reference. Now in this case we have A3. I am in row A3 and I want the row number. So you can see here that for this particular cell, A3, it returns 3. That's the row number 3. Now if I drag this down, the formula will give me now the row of each cell, going down the column. Now I don't want the rows to start from 3, so I'm going to deduct 2 to obtain 1. So you can see now I have generated a series of IDs going down the column. However, what I don't want is to keep this as formulae. Why? Because if I sort or I move the rows in relation to each other, this formula will always stay the same. Okay? So let me give you an example. What I will do is I will apply a filter. Yes? So let's assume that I'm going to sort by the verbal test from the largest to the smallest. You can see what happened here. I've sorted this column, but then this column has stayed the same. Why? Well, because it's a formula, so it gets recalculated and it stays the same. You know, the formula row of A3 will always return the same value, which is not good, because what this means is that we messed up the correspondence between the student and the grades. So I'm going to do a Ctrl Z to go back. And what we'll do is we'll copy and paste this as values so that we get rid of the formula. And now you can see we kept only the values. So now I know student 1 has 450. So if I sort, I should go down and look for 450. Right? You can see somewhere I should find student 1. See? There you are. student 1. So now it's all right. Going to go back, put them back. So we have the values. Okay, the next thing we showed in class is how to calculate some descriptive statistics. The mean, the max, the mode, and the median. Now the other thing that I showed you in class is that I created what's called named ranges. So verbal test will refer to this column, and maths test refers to this column. Okay, and I showed you in class how to create them. Now this is useful because when we write the formulae, I can just use the name ranges without having to type a lot of different formula and make mistakes. So I can refer to those values. It's a bit like having an array. I defined an array with the name verbal test. Not mean, but the average. And then here we have the mode with the verbal test. Okay, and then the median, and then the standard deviation. Great, and then we do the same thing for the next column. So we do the mean. Of course, this time we have the range called maths test, and we've calculated the statistics. So if we look at this data, we can see that the median, the mode, and the mean are closely together in the first scenario. So we are expecting a distribution that is quite balanced. It's a normal distribution. And for the maths test, there's a bit more dispersion around the mean, so be more skewedness around the mean. Now, how do we display this data in charts? So one thing that you could do is select the area you want to display. Okay. So we have the area, and then we insert a chart. Now, what chart should be useful for this data? Of course, we discussed already in class that a scatter chart would probably be more suitable. So here we are. We have the scatter chart for the verbal test. And then you can do the same for the remaining. Now here you have to select the columns individually. So one column, and then you click Control and select the second column, because these are not together. They are not next to each other. So then we insert the scatter again. And of course, what we have them here is we actually sorted them from the smallest to the largest. So you can see here that what I'm seeing is already a sorted kind of distribution, right? Now this is okay, but you know, what do these charts tell us? Well, this chart is a bit more informative because it does show us how things are between the mean, right? They are all concentrated around the mean. The other thing you can do to see things better is format the axis. Now we can see here that the minimum is 300, so there's no point showing all sorts of numbers or ranges that don't have any values in them. And also the maximum is 780. So now we can see this information a little bit more clearly. But you can see here that what would be interesting to see is to have the information of how many people are between 690 and 790. How many people are between 590 and 690. How many people are between 490 and 590. Now this is what we call bins. So what we are going to do is we are going to define our bins. So let's say that we start at 290, then we go to 390, 490, 590, 690, 790, 890. Okay, of course we can put 800 there because there's really nothing beyond 790. Now, how do we calculate the frequencies? Well, remember what we said is we highlight the range on which we want to put the frequencies, and then we go into the formula bar and we start typing frequencies, we have to put the data array. Now in this case it will be the verbal test. Okay, so we want the verbal test, comma, and here we put the bins by simply selecting the bins in the column that we defined. Okay, now if I click enter, I will only get a value in the first row, but we want an array. So what I have to do is shift control enter. So if I do shift control enter, it's going to give me the values. Now what do this represent? Well, it represents how many values are between 0 and 290, how many values are between 290 and 390, how many values are between 390 and 490, and so on. Now if we are to plot this one now, I'm going to put a column chart here, we are going to see something a bit, more expected. Now series 1, this one, is the bins, but we don't want to see the bins, okay, so I'm going to delete it. Series 2 is the actual distributions. Now let me sort out the chart a little bit. So I'm going to remove the gaps between them so we can see them nicely. Okay, so as you can see here that we do have a normal distribution. Okay, now what series do we have? Let's put the name for the series within quotes, frequencies, verbal test. Okay, so we can see something a bit nicer that we've seen before. So now we can see the distribution. Now let's do the same thing for the verbal test, for the maths, sorry. So we do frequencies. Okay, let's put them separately. Okay, so let's move this chart. We put it together like that. And I'm going to generate the bins for the verbal test. And frequencies. Okay, and this is the verbal, sorry. This is the verbal, and I'm going to merge the cells. Okay, and this is the maths test, yeah. I'm going to copy the formatting on this one. Bins. Now what bins should we do here? You can see that the minimum is 350, the maximum is 800. So let's start between 350, 450, 550, 650, 750, 850. Right, and of course this probably is the last one. You can put 950 if you want, but you'll get zeros. And we do the same thing as before. We highlight, we go into the formula bar, and we start writing frequency. Now we need the math test range, and the bins are next. But instead of clicking enter, again, remember, it's easy to make these mistakes. Shift, Control, Enter. Those are the bins that we have. Now let's try and plot this again using the bar. Okay, there you are. I'm going to put them here for the moment. I will delete the bins, and I'm going to format this one. Oops, sorry. Something is, oh no, not the trend line. I'm going to format. Okay, let me put it up here. There's interference between my video and okay, fine, it's better. So I'm going to take the gap off, and now we can see the frequencies that we have in the previous scenario, where we can see here that in the bin 4, right, which is this one, they are the highest number of, so between 550 and 650, which makes sense, right? Because